Aibowan, and a very good evening to all our viewers here on TV1. I'm Dr. Dilshan Fernando, and this is your weekly dose of wellness here on Healthline. We are still in times of COVID, and during this period, our focus has mainly been on contagious diseases, or as we call it, communicable diseases. But we should not lose our focus on the non-communicable diseases as well. And when we say non-communicable diseases, diabetes is one major aspect that comes into our mind. It's a disease which is a chronic disease, and if not controlled properly, can cause very severe complications. Now, World Diabetes Day falls on the 14th of November, and to coincide with that, we thought of talking about this very far-reaching disease today here on Healthline. And to talk about this, we have invited consultant endocrinologist and diabetologist Dr. Sachit Abeyratna to the studios today. He is also a senior lecturer in pharmacology at the Faculty of Medicine in University of Colombo. A very good evening to you, sir, and thank you very much for joining us here on Healthline.
Good evening, Deshan.
So, first and foremost, when we talk about diabetes, even though it's a very commonly heard term, I think most of our viewers are not very clear on what diabetes is. And there are various types. We hear about type 2 diabetes, then there's another one called type 1 diabetes. So, for the benefit of our viewers, can you elaborate what diabetes is and what are these various types?
Yes, Deshan. Now, you know that all our cells in the body need energy for the functioning. And glucose is the main energy source for the most of the cells. Now, in blood, I'll show you with this diagram. When you take a meal, most of the carbohydrates or starchy things in the meal will be turned into glucose, and that is shown in the white circles here. And when the blood glucose increases, the body will detect that, and from the pancreas, which is in the tummy, it will secrete a hormone called insulin. Now, here it is shown as a key. Why that is because once these glucose reaches the cell, there is actually a door. Without opening the door, you cannot get inside. And for the blood glucose to enter into the cell, the insulin acts as that key, and it will unlock this door and open the door, and once that happens, glucose will enter into the cell. That is how our blood glucose level comes back to the normal after we take a meal. Now, in diabetes, what happens is this insulin secretion is defective. So, sometimes you do not have enough insulin, or sometimes even though insulin is there, they are not working in the proper way. So, when the insulin is not there, when blood sugar reaches the cell, it cannot get in because this door cannot be opened. Sometimes I told you, even if the insulin is there, it is not the proper, it's like not the proper key to open the door. So, it cannot open the door, so the blood glucose cannot enter. So, therefore, diabetes is a condition where blood glucose increase in the blood, and thereby we diagnose diabetes when the blood glucose level is high. And then we have different types of diabetes. So, mainly we divide diabetes into type 1 and type 2. In type 1 diabetes, what happens is the antibodies in the immune system misrecognize these glucose producing cells called beta cells, and they destroy them. So, once that happens, body does not have any insulin. So, these patients will definitely need insulin to sustain their life. And in type 2 diabetes, they have insulin less so than a normal person, but their insulin is not working in the proper way. So, even there is insulin, they cannot open these locks to get the glucose into the cells. So, those are the two main types, and out of them the type 2 diabetes is the common one, which is more than 95% of the time what we see. And apart from these two, we have another type called gestational diabetes, and that is the type of diabetes what you get in pregnancy, especially the late part of pregnancy. That is because of the anti-insulinic effect of the pregnancy hormone. Usually it is a temporary phenomenon. After the pregnancy, most patients will have normal blood sugar levels.
Right. So, as we know, it's a condition where the insulin is not working as it should. Now, we said that diabetes is a very common condition. Now, we talk about the global statistics. It is estimated that about 420 million people are suffering from diabetes, and the statistics show that about 1.6 million deaths every year is directly associated with diabetes. Now, let's talk about the Sri Lankan setup. How common is diabetes in Sri Lanka? How prevalent is it?
Yeah, you are quite right, Dilshan. It's a very major disease in the world, but it's not so different in Sri Lanka as well. So, we have studies, national studies done some time back, which showed that the national prevalence of diabetes is something close to about 10%. And there's another category called pre-diabetes, where the blood sugars are not high enough to call it as diabetes, but above the normal range, that is called the pre-diabetes. When you combine the diabetes and pre-diabetes, the prevalence was about 20%. That means 1 in every 1 in 5 had some form of glucose abnormality. That was some time back. Now, after that, we didn't have any major national wide studies, but there were many small studies which showed that this prevalence have increased even further. And it is worrying to see that in certain urban setups, when they did these studies, the prevalence of diabetes alone was close to about 20%. That is 1 in 5, every 1 in 5 in those certain communities had diabetes. So, if you combine it pre-diabetes, you can think what is the scale of problem. So, that is where we are heading now. And we know that even in rural areas, this has increased significantly, because there are a lot of lifestyle changes which has happened over the past decade or so. So, the trend is worrying actually, and it is certainly on the rise. So, therefore, I think this is a good time that we all be alert on this and take some action to prevent diabetes growing even further.
Definitely. Now, we know that diabetes is on the rise, and as Dr. Abeyratna said, 1 in 5 is a very high number, and the trend seems to be keep increasing. Now, when a person gets diabetes, now people tend to correlate it mainly with the diet, but what are the risk factors that are involved with diabetes per se? What are the risk factors that predispose towards diabetes?
Well, the genetics play a major role as well. So, if we take the South Asians, we are considered as a high risk category to develop diabetes. But unfortunately, we can't change that fact. But fortunately, there are other factors which are modifiable. So, those are called the environmental factors. One main thing is this obesity. I think it is alone with diabetes, we have seen increasing numbers of obesity in our population. So, whenever you have fat in the tummy area or the abdomen, that promotes this insulin resistance, which is one of the main underlying reasons to get diabetes. And apart from that, the other things like unhealthy diet, for example, taking high sugar beverages, taking a lot of fast foods, I think these days very popular among youth. Those things, and the sedentary lifestyle with urbanization and people getting busy most of the time, stress as well as the sedentary lifestyle, those have contributed to increased amount of diabetes. And then if the patients, anyone had diabetes during pregnancy, that also is a high risk factor to develop diabetes in later life. And the other associated factors are if you have hypertension, high cholesterol level, if you are a smoker, those factors can also contribute to developing this type 2 diabetes later in life.
So, definitely. Now, with regards to diabetes, there are so many factors which are modifiable that leads to diabetes. So, I think you, our viewers, would find it greatly beneficial to know how you can modify your lifestyle, especially like Dr. Abeyratna said, most of us are having a very strenuous and stressful lifestyle, and with this our dietary habits, our patterns have changed, and this has led towards so many diseases. Now, talking about diabetes, what would be the signs and symptoms involved? How can a person know that, okay, I might be getting diabetes or I might be a diabetic already? What are the signs and symptoms?
Yeah, so here Dilshan, the most important thing to say is that most of the diabetic patients are asymptomatic. So, most of them will develop symptoms quite late in the disease when their blood sugars are very high, but before that they are asymptomatic, they will not have any symptoms. So, that is why we mostly stress that they have to undergo this screening test to detect diabetes at an early stage. But when your sugars are very high, then you can develop some symptoms. So, the common ones are they can feel thirsty, they will pass urine more frequently and pass a large amount of urine. Sometimes there could be unintended weight loss happening, and then fatigue can be there sometimes, and then they can also present with some of the complications of diabetes. So, common ones are they can get infection, they are more prone to get infection like the urinary tract infections. So, those are the common presenting thing, but most of them, as I mentioned, can be asymptomatic.
Right. Now, before we move further, sir, diabetes was usually associated with old age, but trend seems to be a bit different now. So, is it actually with age that you tend to develop diabetes in your practice as a endocrinologist and a diabetologist? Do you see that the younger population getting diabetes, is it a trend now these days?
Yeah, you are quite right, Dilshan. Now, earlier it was called as disease of the aged population, but now the trend is been reversing, and we see lot of young patients even starting from 20s, in their 80s, coming with type 2 diabetes. Because earlier whenever we had diabetes in children, we used to classify it as type 1 diabetes, because we didn't, very rarely we saw type 2 diabetes in younger children. But now with the increasing obesity, because even in school children, among school children, you know that the amount of physical activity is not that great, and the obesity is also common among children now. With that, the increase in diabetes has also happened. So, type 2 diabetes we are now seeing around the age of 18, 19 of that age group. So, that is very worrying, because as you can imagine now, if we diagnose a patient around 18 years and usual life expectancy in Sri Lanka is about 76 years, they have a long time to live with diabetes, and they have more chance of getting these complications, and then once they develop complications they have a longer time to live with that. So, their quality of life will be very low. So, this is really a worrying trend.
Definitely. Now, diabetes is a chronic disease, and living with it requires certain amount of discipline and care from your point of view as well. Now, you spoke about certain complications about diabetes. Now, what would be the complications can this diabetes lead towards?
Yeah, so why we are so concerned about diabetes is because of these complications rather than just the increase in blood sugar. Because we know that whenever the blood glucose levels are above the normal range, they have the tendency to go and damage the many of the organs in the body, especially the vital organs like the heart, your kidneys, the small nerves and blood vessels, as well as the eyes as well. So, the common complications are, we can divide them into two categories based on the complications rising due to the damage to the large vessels as well as smaller vessels. So, this due to damage to the smaller blood vessels, you can get diabetic eye disease. So, it is starting from it can lead to glaucoma, it can lead to the vision loss and bleeding into the eye, which can ultimately lead to the permanent visual loss. And then it can damage the nerves, small nerves in the legs especially. So, once that happens, patients lose their ability to feel the pain and all. That will predispose them to get wounds very easily, and once the wounds are there, they will not heal properly. That will ultimately sometimes lead to amputations of the legs. And then the other thing is to the blood supply to the kidneys can get affected. That will lead into kidney disease, diabetic kidney disease, which can lead into the very severe disease where you need dialysis and later transplantation as well. And then we are more worried about these diabetic related large vessel disease, because we know that 2/3 of our patients will die ultimately from one of these large vessel disease. Those are the ischemic heart disease, that is the heart attacks we commonly call. You can easily get heart attacks even without, sometimes without chest pain. So, that is a kind of a concerning factor, and then they can easily get strokes, and as well as there are blood supply to the legs can also be compromised, leading to foot wounds and leading to amputations. So, those are some of the major complications. Other than that, they are more prone to get infections, lot of infections starting from urinary tract infections, pneumonias, and even serious life threatening infections are more common in these age groups. Actually, if you take all the organs, you will have some kind of change when you have uncontrolled diabetes. So, these are some of the main complications I have described.
Now, when diabetic patients come to us, sometimes they complain of numbness in their feet, and you spoke about the possibility of leading to the extent of amputations as well. So, foot care is very important in diabetic patients. Can you elaborate a bit on how these diabetic patients should take care of their feet in their day-to-day lifestyle?
Yeah, so very correct. So, this is the foot care is a part where most patients neglect when they have diabetes, and it's a very important thing in their routine care, because as I mentioned, if you don't be careful, it can lead into wounds which will not heal properly, ultimately could lead into amputation. So, what we recommend is, number one is you should have a very good glucose control, that is by means of your lifestyle control as well as taking your medications in the proper way. And the second thing is you have to daily see whether if there are even any small wounds are there in your feet. So, you have to examine your feet daily and see, because most of these patients who have diabetes for a long time, they have a their nerves are not working in the proper way, we call that neuropathy. So, they do not feel pain, so they can easily get foot wounds even without noticing. So, once a wound occurs, if you treat it at the early stage in the correct way, most of the time you can get rid of that without any complications. But if they are neglected, then the problems will start. These wounds will get bigger, and once that happens, they will not heal properly, and then they will get infected. So, you can get this condition called cellulitis, and then sometimes when it is really bad, sometimes only way to save the person is by doing amputation. So, to prevent those things, the other important thing we advise these patients is to use a proper footwear. So, there are these specialized diabetic footwear. If you can buy them, that is one of the best investment you can do. If not, you can wear a reasonable footwear which will protect your feet. Whenever you go out, you should wear footwear. You should never walk barefoot if you have diabetic nerve problems, because without your knowledge you can get these wounds, and all these complications can happen. So, these are the important things patients should remember in terms of foot care.
Definitely, if you are a diabetic patient, you should always be mindful about your foot care, especially when going out. Like Dr. Abhiratna was mentioning, there are specialized foot care for diabetics, and it's a worthwhile investment. Now, we spoke about the symptoms and signs. If a person thinks, okay, I might be getting diabetes, or I'm a diabetic already, what kind of investigations would you employ to come to this diagnosis?
Okay, so I'm sure you all have heard about this fasting blood sugar. It's a common test. So, we do this fasting blood sugar. We generally advise patient to fast for about 8 hours without taking any beverages, but you can take water while you are fasting, that's no problem. And then we do the fasting blood sugar. So, if it is high, we would like to confirm it by doing another test, and then other than fasting blood sugar, we can also do after meal blood sugar as well. So, if that is also high, that also gives some clue. And then another test we do is called the oral glucose tolerance test. What we do there is, patient comes fasting, then we give 75 grams of glucose for the patient to drink, and after that we take blood sugar and 1 hour and 2 hours and see whether they are within the normal range. This is kind of a cumbersome test, so we generally do not do to diagnose our normal patient. This is mainly to diagnose these patients within the pregnancy, that is called gestational diabetes. That is the standard test we do. Other than that, there is another test called HbA1c, which we earlier used mainly to monitor the patient's blood glucose, but now we use it even to diagnose diabetes as well.
Now, you spoke about fasting blood sugar and you said 8 hours of fasting is sufficient and that you can take water while you are fasting. And this is a very common misconception that we face with our patients on a day-to-day basis. Some say I have been fasting for 10 hours, 12 hours, some even go up to the extent of 16 hours of fasting. Now, with regards to fasting blood sugar, if you extend your fasting to up to a certain period of time, I believe the results can get deranged. I think our viewers would be greatly benefited if you can explain to us what happens during this fasting period and what range of time period that they should remain fasting before testing their blood sugar.
Yes. So anyway, the fasting is generally hassle to a patient. So we will give them the minimum time for the fasting most of the time. So 8 hours is enough. If you are just doing the fasting blood sugar, 8 hours is enough. But most of the time when we do the fasting blood sugar, we also request this lipid profile, that is to test your cholesterol. A general duration of fasting for lipid profile is around 12 hours. That will be the best. So to come to a compromise, for most of the time we say if you fast for 10 hours, you can do your fasting blood sugar as well as lipid profile. But you should not fast more than 12 hours, because if you fast for a prolonged period, then the blood sugars can again change and we might not get the correct picture. Sometimes it may be low, it might be a falsely low value. So therefore, we might not get the correct picture. So anywhere between 8 to 10 hours is a reasonable time to do the fasting blood sugar.
So let me reiterate that once again for the benefit of our viewers. If you are only getting a fasting blood sugar, 8 hours of fasting is sufficient. But if you are also testing for your lipid profile, then something between 10 to 12 hours of fasting should be enough. Anything beyond that can derange the results of this. Now, talking about fasting blood sugar, sir, beyond which point do we diagnose diabetes?
Yes, Dilshan. So I will explain it using this diagram. Now, I think I will show this. Now, we do the fasting blood sugar, and if you can see this value, we take 126 milligrams per deciliter as the cutoff for diabetes. So, if your blood sugar is persistently higher than 126, maybe a couple of times at least, then we can diagnose diabetes. So, anything between 100 to 125, we call that pre-diabetes. That is, you are not quite there, but very likely to get diabetes within the coming years unless you do some lifestyle control. Below 100 generally, that is within the normal range. And apart from this fasting blood sugar, I mentioned about this oral glucose tolerance test which we do during pregnancy. They are anything more than 200, it is considered as diabetes. Even single test we can diagnose diabetes. Anything between 140 to 119, again that belongs to the pre-diabetes range, and below 140, that is normal blood sugar. Now, I told you we have another test called HbA1c. So, I will explain little later how we work it out, but the cutoff value we take is usually if it is below 6.5, if it is above 6.5, we take it as diabetes, and anything between 6.4 and 5.7, that we take it as pre-diabetes, and below 5.7, we take it as normal blood sugar level. So, these are the general cutoff values we use to diagnose diabetes.
Now, since you are already on the topic of testing for diabetes, let us elaborate a bit more, sir, on what this HbA1c is. We know that it gives an idea of the long term control of sugar in a patient. Now, how does this work and what is its significance?
Okay, again Dilshan, I will explain it through this diagram. Now, if you can see this, we all know in our blood we have these red blood cells. This is what is shown here in the red color. And in the red blood cells, we have a substance called hemoglobin. You may have all heard about it. That is the oxygen carrying molecule within the red blood cells. So, usually when there is glucose in the blood, a part of that will get bound to this hemoglobin, and depending on the glucose concentration, this value will change. Now, as long as the red blood cell circulates in the blood, these hemoglobin carrying these glucose molecule attached to it will be circulating. So, if you can measure the glucose attached to this hemoglobin, that will give us an idea what has been the control for a period of time, because we know the red blood cells will last for about 3 months in our circulation. So, if you measure the sugar levels in these red blood cells attached to the hemoglobin, we can say what is the average sugar for a period of about 3 months time. So, here in this diagram, if you can see, these are the values. Now, generally in normal person, I told you anything below 6.5 will have normal blood sugar. So, 6 of HbA1c will generally denote about 126 average blood glucose value. And in diabetic patients, we generally try to keep their control around the range of 70, but that will depend. If it is a younger patient, we will like to keep it closer to the 6. If it is a very elderly patient, probably we will be little relaxed and we might even go up to 8. So, if we keep it 7, that is the average blood glucose value of around 152. So, here as I explained earlier, anything above 6.5 we can also use to diagnose diabetic from a single test. And the good thing about this test is that you do not need any fasting, you can do it at any time irrespective of your meal time. So, that is very convenient to the patient. And the other thing is, it is very useful to see the patient's control. Sometimes we know that before they come to us, they do very good diet control, they get their fasting blood sugars control. So, when we see very good results with their fasting blood sugars, but if we look at the HbA1c, which is about 3 months control, that gives a quite different picture. So, when we assess a patient, we do these tests as well to see the ideal control in a patient. Having said that, there are few issues with these tests, because we are measuring the glucose attached to the hemoglobin. If the patient's hemoglobin level is low, that is what we call as anemia. If they have anemia, these values may not be very accurate. And at the same time, if they have chronic kidney disease also, again these values may not be very accurate. So, in that situation, we will have to use other tests to assess the proper control in these patients.
Now, if I may recap what Dr. Abeyratna was talking about, HbA1c is something that gives an understanding of the past 3 months of your blood sugar control. So, when you are going for your regular follow-ups to your endocrinologist or diabetologist, you may tend to control your meals for a good 2 to 3 days and get a fasting blood sugar, but still this HbA1c gives a good idea of what your blood sugar control has been over the past 3 months, and it is a very valuable diagnostic tool that we use. Now, sir, once a patient has been diagnosed with diabetes, we see certain patients are put on medication, some are told to control their diet. So, how do you decide on this, and can you elaborate more on this treatment of diabetic patients?
Yes, Dishan. Now, that will certainly depend on the type of diabetes they have. If they have type 1 diabetes, as I mentioned, they will absolutely need insulin to maintain their life. So, that is will always start insulin while we are advising on the lifestyle modification in a type 1 patient. If they are type 2, still then most patients will need at least little bit of medicines apart from the lifestyle modifications. That is because to maintain the optimum level of glucose control. Having said that, there may be very few patients who will be able to maintain normal glucose levels without any medicines. Those are the patients who can do lot of lifestyle modifications, who have time to do lot of exercises, can go to the gym and can make a significant change in their diet. Suppose that they were taking very unhealthy diets earlier, if they can now, if they are willing to change to a completely healthy diet, probably those patients would be able to manage without any medicines. But all the other patients, when they are diagnosed with type 2, along with the lifestyle modifications, we start them on medicines. And what amount of medicines will we use will depend on how much lifestyle control the patient is doing. And about this gestational diabetes or diabetes in pregnancy, usually most patients can be managed without any medicines. They can be managed with only with the diet and the little bit of physical activity, and very rarely they will need medicines to control their diabetes.
Now, when we are talking about diabetes, one of the most important things that our viewers would want to know is which type of food that they can eat and which type of food that they have to avoid. So, can we elaborate more on what they should be eating and what they should be avoiding?
Yes, well Dishan, you know that we all enjoy our food. So, as endocrinologists, we do not put a lot of restrictions on our patients. What we generally advise them is just follow the healthy diet which we recommend for all other people. So, if I tell you what is the healthy diet, I will show you using this diagram. Now, this is a plate which will show what is a healthy diet. In a healthy diet, the essential components are that you should have lot of vegetables in your plate. So, we say that half of your plate should be vegetables. So, you can eat most of the vegetables in reasonable quantities. And if you take your starchy foods, that is the main food category which will contribute to the increase in blood glucose. So, that amount you need to restrict a little bit. So, that if you take from the plate, that should be quarter of your plate as here. And it is important that you also should select better types of starchy foods. What we recommend is foods with lot of fiber. So, things like red rice, the wholemeal items like wholemeal pastas or wholemeal bread, those are fine. So, those are the ones. You should avoid these things like white rice and other pastries, the normal bread, those things better to avoid because they will be very quickly turn into the sugar. Even with these the healthy carbohydrates like the red rice, the amount is the most important. So, what we will advise is to restrict it to quarter of your plate. And then protein items also you can eat about quarter of your plate, any item which you like, but when you are taking these protein items, it is important that not to use lot of oil and use deep fried items that can contribute to the increase in the cholesterol level. Now, apart from this is the general healthy plate, and then you can eat lot of fruits. We generally again we do not restrict the types of fruit, but there are certain fruits like these mangoes, pineapples, they have higher sugar content. So, if you really want to eat them, you can eat them, but if you are doing that, you have to eat a small quantity and it should be away from a main meal, because if you take even a healthy diet like this, you will get reasonable amount of glucose out of that. So, if you eat your fruits just after that, there is going to be too much of glucose at a single point. So, if you want to eat fruits, our general advice is take it as a snack, not as a dessert. So, if you are eating the high sugar ones, restrict the amount. The low sugar fruits like these guavas, a little bit of avocado, green apples, you can eat little more than the other fruits. And other than that, there are very few items we would request our patient to not to take. Those are these very high sugar items like these sugar sweetened beverages, which are very difficult if they are taking them. It is very difficult to achieve the control even with insulin. So, this is the diet. If you can follow this diet and if you take your medicines well, I am sure that your glucose could be well controlled.
That's a very important point that Dr. Abhiratna makes. Whether you are diabetic or not, having a healthy diet and a healthy lifestyle definitely will pay off in the long term. Now, talking about medicines for diabetes, sir, we have seen so many drug classes being used for diabetes, and we know that it is a lifelong disease. So, firstly, elaborate for us a bit of what these drugs are, and also taking these drugs lifelong, is it safe for these patients?
Yes, I think that is a very important question to discuss because that is a question always our patients ask us. So, just to give you a brief idea about what are the medicines available, I think we have so many different medicines, nearly about 12 classes of medicines now. Now, the main things these medicines do is either most of them will increase the insulin production from the existing beta cells in the body. So, they increase the insulin amount that will lower the blood sugar. And I also told you that in type 2 diabetes there is bit of insulin resistance. Although the insulin is there, body is not responsive. So, there is another whole set of medicines which will improve this insulin resistance. So, we call that insulin sensitivity, they improve it. And by doing that, the body's own insulin will work better in this way. So, if I give you some of the common medicine classes, one thing is this metformin, which have been used for a long period of time, and that is one of the first line medicines which is recommended throughout the world. And then we have a group called the sulfonylurea. The common drugs in that are called glycoside, glimepiride, you may have heard about them. So, those are the some of the insulin secreting powerful drugs. And then we have another different drugs which act in different mechanisms by promoting insulin secretion as well as reducing your satiety, reducing the speed of releasing the food content into the stomach, etc. So, there are multiple mechanisms. And then recently also we have got a new medicine class called SGLT2 inhibitors. You may have heard, some of you, like the drugs like empagliflozin, dapagliflozin. So, those act in a kind of a peculiar way because we know that in a normal person they will not pass any sugar with urine unless if their diabetic control is poor. Because in the kidneys they will absorb all the glucose and nothing will appear in urine. But these drugs, what they do is they stop that process and they let the kidneys pass glucose out of the body, so that the blood glucose amount will decrease. It has shown to be a very effective method, although it sounds little peculiar. And in addition to lowering the blood glucose, these new class of drugs have also shown to lower the heart disease risk, which is one of the main problems we face with these diabetic patients, as well as they lower the kidney disease progression in diabetic patients. So, there are actually some new exciting developments in the medicines for diabetes.
Now, why we talk about these medicines for diabetes or for that matter any disease here on Healthline is not to promote self-medication. You have to always follow up with your doctor, a properly registered medical practitioner for you to change your drugs or to change the dosage. Now, talking about drugs for diabetes, we spoke about the oral drugs, and if those fail we go into insulin, but use of insulin is not without its own risks. So, can you talk a bit about use of insulin and what patients should be careful about when they are using this insulin?
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, Dilshan, now type 2 diabetes is kind of a progressive disease. Over the period of time, the number of cells producing insulin will go down. So, with that, even though there are many oral medicines available, some of these medicines will not respond, because if your body does not have enough insulin, the medicines cannot extract enough out of that. So, when that happens, patients have to usually go on insulin. So, that is a kind of a expected thing, but most of the time what happens is when we suggest insulin, patients think it is a punishment for them and they want to postpone it, they want to try something else like that. But I have to say that most patients after about period of time, maybe 15-20 years, will need insulin. That is a natural thing we expect. So, we have different types of insulin. Now, one of the fears these patients have when we say insulin is they always remember that the big needles they used to get in hospitals.
The fear of injection.
Fear of injections, but I have to say that these we do not use the normal needles for the insulin. There is a specialized needle called insulin syringes. They have very, very fine needles. And more than that, now we have other devices to inject insulin very conveniently. Those are called insulin pens, and they use very fine needles. If I tell you the actual gauge, it is about 1/4 of a millimeter width and about 4 millimeters in size. You can hardly ever see it if you look at a distance. So, these are not painful at all if you do it in the correct technique. It is very easy to administer insulin nowadays. And insulin is a very powerful agent, we have to remember that, because if it is very important that you have to take it as your doctor has advised, because if you are injecting insulin, that has to be in relation to a meal. If you inject insulin much before or much later than your meal, it is likely that you might go into a very low blood sugars, a situation we call as hypoglycemia. It's a very dangerous situation. Sometimes you can lose consciousness and it will be life threatening as well. So, to prevent that, the most important things to do is that you have to time your insulin with your meal. And again, this timing will depend on the type of insulin you take. In the market now we have different types. If I categorize into two, we have these natural human insulins, where you have to inject about half an hour before, because they take some time to enter into the bloodstream. And then we have this improved version, little bit costlier than these natural insulins, called analog insulins. They have improved fast acting insulins, and if you inject 5 minutes before, that would be enough. But some people tend to take insulin after their meals, or sometimes whenever they remember. So, that is a very dangerous practice, and we have seen patients going into dangerous hypoglycemias with that kind of thing. So, it is very important that you have to take the proper dose which the doctor has mentioned, and then you have to take it with the correct timing. And sometimes another problem we have seen is whenever patients take a large meal, they tend to increase their dose and inject, thinking that that will control their blood sugar. Again, I would say that is a very dangerous practice. Again, that can lead into severe low blood sugar levels called hypoglycemia. You should never do that unless your doctor has trained you to adjust your insulin, but even then it is about small units, like about 2 to 4 units maximum. Beyond that you should never do that. Even that you should do if your doctor has trained you how to do that. Along with that, Dilshan, I think in your first question, the previous question, I wanted to answer a small part about the safety of the oral medicines. Now, there are a lot of myths among our patients that taking these drugs for a long period will cause some damage. That is a completely a false belief. Now, this is especially common with this drug called metformin. Wherever you go in the world, they will give you metformin, because that is a very safe drug if you use it in the proper way, and it will not cause any kidney damage or long term complications if you use it in the proper way. It is only the fact that sometimes when the patients have kidney diseases, we do not use these drugs because the medicines are not being excreted in the proper way. But all the other patients who have reasonable kidney functions, these medicines are safe and they will not cause any long term problems. It is the elevated blood sugars or high blood sugars that will cause all the problems. So, by using the medicines in the proper way, including insulin, you are going to reduce all these complications.
Exactly. Now, let me once again emphasize on what Dr. Sachita Abeyratne just mentioned. Insulin is a very powerful agent, and it has the ability to reduce blood sugar very rapidly. And it's very important that you use the insulin as advised by your doctor and not haphazardly. Now, you spoke about hypoglycemia, sir. It would be important for our viewers to know how to identify hypoglycemia and what to do about it if they do face such a situation.
Yeah, so most of the time when you unlike the high blood sugars, when your blood sugars are low, body will quickly detect it. So, mostly you will feel a little bit of faintish, you will feel very extreme hunger and sometimes sweaty and a little bit of fatigue. So, if you are getting these symptoms, if you have access to a glucometer, you should quickly check your blood sugar. If this is frequently happening, you should always go to the doctor and inform them so that they can modify the medicines. Most of the time why these hypoglycemic episodes happen is because either if they are on insulin, they do not time their meals with the insulin, or if they do some extra physical activity, because the medicines are titrated based on their regular day to day routine. So, if they do sports activity or extra physical activity, that also tends to lower the blood sugar. So, in that situation again they can get these low blood sugars. So, it is important to prevent that, because if there is severe hypoglycemia, that can lead into coma situation. So, what we advise the patient are that it is always better while you are taking your meals, take some snacks in between to prevent that, and time the insulin in the correct way and take the medicines in the proper way. Do not take excess doses, double doses. If you miss one, do not take double doses, stick to the general normal regime.
Now, as we discussed diabetes is a lifelong disease, and living with diabetes means that you have to get yourself followed up regularly. What would be your recommendation for our diabetics? How often should they get followed up? And we spoke about certain complications as well. And do they need to assess themselves for these complications regularly as well, sir?
Yes, certainly. Now, if their blood sugars are well under control, we usually see them every 3 months. So, with the fasting blood sugar as well as this HbA1c when possible. But if the blood sugars are not controlled, we have to see a little more frequently, even monthly or sometimes even a little earlier than that. And the complications, again, it's very important to screen for complications. Now, for the diagnosis of kidney disease, we do certain set of tests. We generally do them annually. Again, food screening, if they have high risk feet, we do it every visit. Otherwise, we do a food screening test annually as well. At the same time, we do the eye screening test annually as well. But if you have complications, we'll have to do it little more frequently.
Now, we are in times of COVID, and you mentioned about diabetes making these patients more prone towards infection. And I'm sure our viewers would have heard in the mainstream media about how people with comorbidities are more affected by this COVID infection. How has COVID affected these diabetics, and how can these patients protect themselves, especially people who are already diagnosed with diabetes, in this situation of COVID-19?
Yeah, so what the studies have shown is, especially if your control is bad, then you are more prone to get diabetes. But if your control is good, then you are not more prone to get the COVID-19. So therefore, for all the patients, what we advise is you have to take your medicines regularly and control your blood sugars very well during this pandemic period. But it has been challenging because, as you know, with the lockdowns and with a lot of patients coming to the hospital, routine clinics have been cancelled, although they were being given all their medicines regularly. But we know that some patients, because of fear and other reasons, have not come to the hospitals to get their medicine. So it is very important, we emphasize this again, that you should have a very good blood glucose control during this period. Otherwise, if your control is bad, you are more likely to get the COVID-19 infection. And we know that when diabetic patients get the COVID-19 infection, they are more likely to get complications. And if you look at the number of deaths among the 13,000 patients we had, most of them had diabetes or other complications. And the other most important thing I would say would be to get the vaccine. So that has shown to reduce the number of deaths among the diabetic patients. So if you have not taken the vaccine, please take it, that will protect you. And even if you have taken the vaccine, it's very important that you follow the universal precaution, wear your mask and follow all the other universal precautions to stop getting this disease, or even if you get the disease, to prevent getting complications.
Of course, with the lockdown coming to an end, life seems to be coming back to some sense of normalcy, but that doesn't mean that we should let our guard down. Like Dr. Abeyratna said, if you are a diabetic especially, you should get yourself vaccinated, make sure that your blood sugar control is good, and of course follow the rest of the precautions that we have been taking so far, the hand washing, the respiratory etiquette, wearing a face mask and social distancing. That still remains the same. We have not gotten out of the woods with regards to COVID-19 as yet. Now, diabetes is a topic that requires very in-depth conversations, sir, but we have time restrictions with regards to our program. Now, as we come to the end of this episode of Healthline, what would be your message to our viewers? Is diabetes preventable? Is there something that they can do to prevent it? And if they are diagnosed with diabetes, what would be your take-home message for them?
Yeah, certainly Dilshan, diabetes is a preventable disease. So I told you about the risk factors. So if you have any of these risk factors like obesity, sedentary lifestyle, unhealthy diet patterns, any of that, you should try to modify that so that you can reduce your risk. So is the smoking, as well as if you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol, you need to take your other medicines to control them as well. In that aspects, physical activity, I would like to again emphasize on that, is a very important thing. Not only it prevents diabetes, it prevents a lot of other non-communicable diseases like high blood pressure as well as high cholesterol levels. So, if you do these things, if you have a healthy lifestyle, you can definitely reduce the chance of getting diabetes in later time. For the diabetic patients, the main advice I need to give you is, don't worry, even if you have diabetes, we have lot of medicines to control your diabetes, and it is very important that you take your medicines regularly, follow the lifestyle advice, go to your clinics regularly, so that you can prevent the complication even if you have diabetes. So, if you do that, there is no reason for you to worry.
Diabetes indeed is a preventable disease, but if you are already diagnosed with it, it can be controlled to a level that you do not develop the complications. Now, it was a very informative and in-depth conversation today along with Dr. Sachit Aberatna. We thank him very much for coming into the studios tonight and to talk about this very important topic for majority of our viewers. And as we thank him, it is time for me to take your leave from this episode of Healthline. Until I meet you again next week with your weekly dose of wellness, this is me, Dr. Dilshan Fernando, wishing all our viewers Ayubowan.